T-Bro in the morning. Laura Styles Rosenberg's on assignment. He's doing WWE right now. Is that what's going on?
That's what he's doing.
ESPN. Listen, up here we got mad jobs, all right? This is how we do it. We work a lot of jobs. Today, give it up for Shola Olatoye. She's the chair of the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA as everybody calls it, or the projects, if you will. How long you been on the job?
Well, first of all, great to be here. Thanks so much for
No
having
problem.
me. The Mayor de Blasio, appointed me in February of 2014, so about 2.5 years.
About 2.5 years. And I wanted to have a conversation today about obviously where New York City housing is and the changes you guys have made, so we'll get to that. But I also wanted to speak to just housing in the city and gentrification and what we're watching our city become, right? And where public housing is in that conversation,
Sure.
right? So where are we today and what are we trying to accomplish with New York City housing today?
Right. Well, first, I think it's great for your listeners to know that, the New York City Housing Authority, we are the country's largest real estate residential owner, period, right?
Wow. Okay.
178,000 units, 400,000 people. We are literally in almost every single New York City neighborhood. And so we house this half of the city's extremely low-income families live in our housing. When I was appointed by the mayor, we came in, we had $17 billion in capital needs. That means that today we need $17 billion to improve what's happening to improve what's happening in people's apartments, right? We had annual operating deficits, essentially functionally, no money at each year.
Screwed up. Things were screwed up.
Mess. So 2 years later, where are we? We will end this year balancing the budget. We've done a ton of work on trying to make our development safer in partnership with NYPD. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their homes, regardless of their zip code. And so cameras, lights, improved doors, improved resident engagement, really important. And also, we're a landlord. So we got to do the basics better. Trash has to get picked up. Lights have to be on, doors have to be locked. And so we are doing a ton of work to just deliver on the basics. I am so encouraged when I go out and visit neighborhoods across the city. I've been to more than 200 of my 328 developments. I show up in my running clothes. I show up, by myself.
Meet the people,
talk to the employees. By the way, a third of my employees live in New York City housing. So these are people and families who, work hard, want what I want for my family. And as the largest housing provider in this city and in this country, we have a responsibility to ensure that that housing is safe, clean, and connected. There's no question that there's a housing crisis in this city. And that's why the de Blasio administration is making the strides it's doing to build more affordable housing. And we're a part of that. And so when families get to the point economically, when they're ready to leave public housing, they should have and must have a place for them to go. But families who are coming in, families who need to get their feet underneath them and get stabilized, our housing has to be safe, it has to be clean, and it has to be connected. So that's what we're doing as part of our plan.
Now, some of the more controversial headlines I've read in the last couple of years were cleanups where, there were people, it's a lottery, it's a waiting list to get on a list. There's not a lot of housing, blah, blah, blah. And people were saying that, you could pay to get to the top, or you could, when I was ready to move out, I used to be able to just kind of gift this apartment to other family members. And I read that you guys are trying to crack down on those things and have had some successes where you've had to get rid of some staff who were, pocketing some side money and bumping people to the top and getting an apartment.
So first of all, under my administration, that has not happened. And the first thing people should know is we have zero tolerance. I have zero tolerance for any kind of activity like that. And your listeners should know they should not pay anyone who's coming to them saying,
I can get you
a spot, right? There are 250,000 people waiting for housing in the New York City Housing Authority's wait list. Okay, so this is huge.
And is it prioritized in any way?
So we do have some priorities. We have, this city, as you know, is also experiencing a homelessness crisis.
Yeah,
20,000 of the 57,000 or so people who sleep in shelter every night are children children, under the age of 18. And so we have partnered with the de Blasio administration to make a priority for homeless families. We have a priority for working families. We have a priority for victims of domestic violence. But the reality is, we have about 4,500 units that come up open every year. People don't move. The average tenure in public housing is about 14 years.
And so stop right there, because I was told and read some articles and have interviewed people over the years that talk about public housing being a stepping stone, was America's stepping stone, right? Around 1930-something, Great Depression.
Absolutely.
It was like, all right, the government's going to step in. We're going to provide public housing, right, as a way to help people get on their feet, right? What ended up happening was the rate of pay and money that people could make annually wasn't matching up to the cost of living and their ability to then move to the next step. So they ended up being stuck, not because they wanted to stay, but they literally could not save up enough money to get from the projects to owning a home. And then you throw in credit issues, right?
Absolutely.
Banks not wanting to give loans to many families based on their redlining because of their ethnic background, Black people not being able to get loans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you throw all these things in, and now you're looking at, we've lived in the projects 25 years.
That's right.
And we don't know how to get out, and we feel stuck, and we feel frustrated. And then you have drug abuse, and then you have mental health issues, and then you have all of these things that come just because of that inability to use that stepping stone, right?
Right.
So where are we at today? Because I know our city is not really easy to live in if you make less than, they say 50,000, but fuck that. Excuse my language. You can't get out of the projects unless you make damn near $75,000, $80,000 a year. It feels like, and that's with two parents working.
That's right. Look, there's no question that New York City is a very expensive place to live for anyone. And certainly for our families, where the average income is about $25,000. But I think it's important to also bust a few myths. Yes, public housing was started across the country in the 1930s. It was started as a place for men, mostly men, returning from the war. It was housing for veterans. It was a jobs program. It was a way to put back to work mostly men at that time, who were coming back from the war and needed income and needed a place to live. So, and then there were a number of reasons: policy changes, systemic racism, housing policies that have created where we are. Fast forward, to 2016, we now have families who have been in public housing for a long time. My grandmother lived in Albany houses in Brooklyn. It was a stabilizing force in our family. Then she moved out. That should be, and that has been, the path for many families. And the question is, how do we strengthen that path going forward? So what the de Blasio administration is doing, what we're trying to do is a couple things. One, make sure that there's housing for people to actually move to. One.
More availability
of affordable housing. Two, connect people to opportunity. So one of the things that we've done here at the New York State Housing Authority, we created something called the Fund for Public Housing, which is our sort of nonprofit social venture fund to tap into the tremendous network of people who grew up in public housing, who, from the extraordinary, Jay-Z and Lloyd Blankfein, to the ordinary, your local teacher's assistant, and et cetera. Tap into that as a way to say, don't come and fix our roof. Help us create pathways to opportunity for our young people, for our adults. And so that's a really important, I think, asset that we'd love to get your listeners, we'd love to get, musicians to sort of be more engaged in, because we know that there are significant unemployment issues, disconnected youth throughout our communities. But most importantly, I think what makes New York City great is that we have the kind of economic, racial, and ethnic diversity that we all cherish, and that makes us New York. And the reality is, in a lot of communities that are experiencing intense gentrification, one of the sort of main sort of reasons why some of those neighborhoods haven't gone the way of other neighborhoods is because public housing is there. Those people are there, right? Those Black and brown people who live in those neighborhoods are there, who work, who bring in, who sort of add to the diversity of the community. So New York City is different from the rest of the country. We're not knocking down our buildings. We're making them better. They have to be safe. They have to be clean. People have every right to leave their house to go to work in the morning and have their floors cleaned and have their trash picked up. So we're doing a number of operational changes to make that a reality, right? Getting our staff at the developments at a staggered shift.
And yeah, I was gonna say making sure there's people staying later.
Right, and earlier. So
earlier.
Yeah, we have a demonstration that we've partnered with our biggest union, the Teamsters, in 12 developments, where staff are on site at 6 a.m. and they're until 8 p.m. And I was just at one of the sites, Dykeman, up in Inwood on Monday, and some of the employees said to me, residents are starting to say thank you. I'm like, because they see you. They can see that you're working, right?
Yeah, most of the time you never see anybody
You never
there.
see anyone, right? So when residents can see that we are working, we are trying to make the kinds of changes that they deserve, that they're paying for, okay? And that we as as citizens are paying for, right? This is taxpayer-funded housing. When people start to see that, I believe there can be, that kind of behavioral change that gets to some of the other issues that you've raised, whether it's, just the small crimes to the bigger crimes that, too many of our families are plagued by. But this is hard work. This is 40 years of disinvestment, so it's not going to change overnight. But I think, what I would...
Real quick, you said 40 years of
disinvestment. So
meaning
for
the 40
federal,
years in this country, our federal government has been pulling money away from public
That's right.
housing.
That's right.
Little
so
by little.
We, since 2001, we've lost $1 billion in...
And where'd that money go?
Not to NYCHA, not to New York City.
Right, okay.
So every year, Congress gives or appropriates money to public housing, and the amount that they have been appropriating every year has gone down.
Is that saying to I mean, there's obviously people there, but that's saying to public housing, look, we don't care about you in some ways. But I guess if I was to try to look at the other side, which is difficult, it's the government saying, listen, we're tired of people staying in these houses so long, so we're going to stop funding them, hoping that they would leave or something? Is that what? Because economically, they're not able to. So if you haven't provided people with the economic abilities to move away from public housing, whether that's through better schooling and
better
education
jobs,
and better job opportunities, how are you then going to pull money away from...
I think that's an excellent question, right? So as that disinvestment has happened, you see the kinds of conditions that too many of our families are living in, right? Roofs that leak, apartments that are moldy, all of
doors
that don't work,
and the crime,
elevators that don't work, and when that environment of no one cares, no one's around, no one's fixing, that leads to some of the things and some of the the sense of I think the real sense of isolation that a lot of our communities are facing. But again, I think what this administration has really focused on is whether it's through connecting people to services that the city already provides. So I was up at Sedgwick in the Bronx last week trying to connect NYCHA residents to the NYCID program, right? Here's a program where you can go to any cultural,
any museum,
institute in the city, right? How many NYCHA residents know about that? We got 200 people to sign up in two weeks, in Sedgwick. So, we are working not only on, we got to protect the buildings and we got to make sure that they stand and then they are, providing safe and decent housing. But then we got to connect people to opportunity. We got to get people connected to jobs. So last year we placed over 3,000 people in permanent jobs through our REASE program. So any of your listeners who live in public housing and want a job, they should call. They should go down to their management office and ask for information about REASE or go on our website.
REASE,
REES.
Okay.
Google it. Go to our website. Check me out on Twitter. Tons of opportunities, getting people job ready. You need a GED, we'll get you into a GED. You need, OSHA training, we'll get you into OSHA training. We have $1 billion of work on the street in terms of construction that's happening throughout the 5 boroughs. Our residents should and must be connected to that. We're actually required by the federal government to make sure that residents who live in public housing actually can benefit from...
Well, because I think the government's like, look, we're paying for this, but we're going to make... People got to work, too.
That's right.
Like, this ain't just a free ride.
That's right.
To what degree does NYCHA make sure that residents are accountable, not only for people coming to visit them that might be causing problems, or even to, damage being done to the places they live, right? Because you hear stories about certain residents don't care, other residents do. There's conflicts over the, and it's like, why does this person even live here if they keep doing damage? So how does your administration navigate that?
Or the residents who live in fear
of
others
being
vocal about the situations that create these hostile environments. Absolutely.
No, I think, there's no question that we got to do a lot better. But a couple of things that we've done in the interim, which is one, working much more closely with NYPD to remove those individuals who are, driving a lot of the crime issues that we see in our communities. So we now have a much more expedited process to do that. But we're in the business of housing people. We don't kick people out, right? So we are but it does require cooperation by the families. And we know this is tough. This is your uncle, your son, your daughter. But, we all live
we
here.
deal with that up here all the time. People get mad at me all the time when I'm like, look, your son is out here gangbanging. They leave the house. Their friends is talking that talk.
Right.
You see what they're doing, and they go in. You see them in front of the building, and you know what's going on. But that's your son. You love him. You don't want to see him go to jail. At a certain point, or you don't want to see things happen. At a certain point, we're all going to be affected by you not taking or not being able to take responsibility for your offspring, right? So then now people got to make tough decisions, which is this motherfucker got to get out of here, B.
I totally agree with you.
If we really want to make changes, then we got to make some tough calls.
And those are the tough conversations that we need to have with families. So I would just say, like, if there's any listeners out there that either feels intimidated because they're afraid that they have someone who might be doing what you talked about, Ebro, they should call us and we will help protect them. And because we ultimately want to protect the tenancy. I don't want to make another homeless family, right? But I got to make sure that people who are doing dirt aren't there. So that's one. Two, we are really cracking down on and really working, I'll say cracking down, but also incentivizing people to, look, pay your rent. When you pay your rent.
Collections.
Right? When you pay your rent, that allows us to have more staff and fix the issues in your apartment. And so, under our administration, we are now collecting more rent. And that's been, robocalls, changing when people can pay, letting people pay multiple times a month, right? If you get paid, at the beginning of the month, at the end of the month, and you need to split your check, we'll help you, Then the other thing is actually connecting those families to financial services. So we have a partnership with some local credit unions that say, like, hey, like, you should have electronic, deposit, and you should have a bank account. And so it's not just give us our money, but how can we help your family, be and become more financially stable? Because it does take time and everyone has a story. And ultimately, we are landlords first, and we got to make sure people are, following the rules. But then, we also are, want to make sure people have a pathway to opportunity. I'll tell you one story up at the Butler houses in Brooklyn, in the Bronx. A member of NYPD observed someone throwing trash out the window. And this is one of those things I just don't understand. I don't understand how people throw trash out the windows, but it's a real issue in a lot of our developments. So apparently this member of NYPD saw it and went upstairs, knocked on the door, gave him a summons. And it's like, that message gets out, right? It is not okay to throw trash out the windows, right?
I mean, that's what I mean about accountability. Like,
absolutely.
Like, what are you doing?
Like, how can we, and with our limited resources, keep our developments clean, pick up the trash, and then be following behind you as you throw out trash.
Well, and then at what
windows.
point, look, I know you can't politically talk about it, but then at what point it's like, do you really want to live here, though? Like, if you're going to throw trash out the window, why are you even here if you don't care about where you live? Like, I don't get that part of it.
Yeah.
And then I know politically you can't just throw people out, but at a certain point, if that's how you behave, why would someone want you living in their neighborhood? Like, I don't get it.
I don't either.
And so look, the lion's share of the people who live in public housing,
They're not doing that.
They're like me and you, right? They're going to work, they're taking care of their kids, they're working hard. And so it's that small percentage. But because we're so big, even if that's 10%, that's still 40,000 people. So, we have to love where you live. I'm so proud to be partnering with these young people at the Green City Force, which is targeted specifically to young people ages 18 to 24 who live in NYCHA, connecting them to green jobs. They're like
The jobs of
300.
tomorrow.
They're
That's
like
the jobs of
300
tomorrow.
ambassadors that are helping me build farms. They're helping me with recycling. They're helping me
Within the complex?
within the development.
Wow.
So Green City Forest, love where you live. It's while Next Generation NYCHA is about improving the quality of life for residents today, but it is also about the next generation.
And the residents, everybody, whatever community you live in, you got to put in work too. You got to make an effort, right?
Absolutely.
Like, it's not just this ain't just a free ride, and this ain't just people just holding your hand and you get to throw trash out the window or piss in the stairwells or write all in the elevator or lock the elevator and have fights and tie each other up and do all that nonsense y'all be doing in the elevators. The next question I have is, what is the stories I hear about some sort of, I guess, rule now that if you live in housing and you invite someone, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, and they have a criminal record or they have something going on with them, it could jeopardize your residency.
So this is what we were talking about earlier, right? Which is, it's called our permanent exclusion policy, and we've had it for a long time. And what we've actually done is really try and streamline it so that we are protecting the tenancy of that family, right? So if you're a family and there's someone who resides with you, whether or not you're related to them, who resides with you, who has been arrested and convicted of some of the most violent crimes. This isn't weed. This is like violent crime, guns, murder, rape, etc. We will take immediate action to exclude you from that development. And it requires the cooperation of the family, meaning that the family.
So that individual gets excluded, not the family.
That is
and then the
correct.
family sometimes obviously feel beholden to their loved ones. And they're like, I'm just trying to give them a place to live. And you guys have to make the tough decision. Sorry, that can't happen.
That can't happen. It can't. We have 400,000 people who deserve to feel safe. And,
can't have a murderer living on.
You can't do it. Now, how do we make sure people go away, they serve their debt, right? They come back. Where are they going to go? This is a huge issue across the country, right? Mass incarceration of Black and brown people. So where do they go when they come home? So we actually have a really innovative pilot program that we're partnering with the Vera Institute for Justice and CSH, cooperative supportive housing organization, to work with about 70, mostly men, but some women, who've come home from serving their sentences. And if they meet a certain level of criteria, actually allowing them to go back and reconnect and reunite with their families. But not just to go home but like connecting them to jobs, healthcare, et cetera. So we want to expand that, right? But people got to follow the rules. And we got to make sure people understand the rules because we have a broader safety directive, which is people got to feel safe. But, this is also, we also recognize that, incarceration affects so many of our families. And so if you're listening and this is something that you're struggling with, again, go down to your management office, go online, and learn more about our permanent exclusion program.
Her name is Shola Olatoye. She's been on the job for 2 years. From what I hear, there's been a lot of improvements. I don't live in public housing, so I can't speak to it other than just what I hear from people. So congrats to you, and thank you for helping the city out. And now, is your job, you work for de Blasio, right? I know that I think pretty soon here we're going to be voting for mayor again and all of that stuff. So what's the turnover in your job? Do you have to get elected in? How does it happen? You get appointed by whatever mayor?
I serve at the pleasure of the mayor. Serve at the pleasure of the mayor. So we have so much work to do. So that's what my head is down, and we're focused on implementing.
Don't worry about the politics.
And the rest will happen.
And for people who want more information on all the amazing programs that you just described, where could they find that?
NYCHA.gov.nyc.
Awesome.
Big up my man Isaac too. Give it up to Shola.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.